Imagine the most iconic face in human history. A face made of solid gold, staring back at you across 3,000 years of silence. Now, imagine that everything you've ever been told about that face is a lie. In 2024, a team of physicists aimed a revolutionary scanning device at Tutankhamun's golden death mask, a treasure so sacred that Egypt had never allowed it to be touched by foreign technology. What they found underneath the surface didn't just rewrite Egyptology, it shattered it. This is the story of a 3,300-year-old cover-up, one so perfectly executed that it fooled every scientist, every archaeologist, and every X-ray machine on the planet. Until now. When British archaeologist Howard Carter cracked open a sealed chamber in Egypt's Valley of the Kings in November 1922, he later described the moment simply, "Everywhere, the glint of gold. Golden chariots, jewel-studded thrones, painted statues frozen mid-step. But nested inside 3 elaborately crafted sarcophagi, wrapped around the mummified remains of a teenage boy who had died over 3 millennia earlier, was the object that would stop the world cold. Tutankhamun's golden funerary mask. Standing 54 centimeters tall and weighing over 10 kilograms of solid gold, it was encrusted with lapis lazuli, turquoise, obsidian, and quartz. The eyes were so carefully crafted from contrasting stones that even under museum lighting they seemed to blink. A protective spell from the Book of the Dead was engraved across its shoulders, intended to guide the pharaoh's soul safely through the underworld. In ancient Egyptian belief, gold was not merely a precious metal. It was the literal flesh of the gods. This mask was sacred technology, a spiritual beacon designed to help Tutankhamun's soul recognize its body for all of eternity. For a century, the world accepted this story without question. The mask was Tutankhamun's. It was made for Tutankhamun, it always had been. But the mask had secrets. Almost immediately after the mask was brought into daylight for the first time in over 3,000 years, trained eyes began to notice things that didn't quite add up. The most glaring of these was the ears. Tutankhamun's mask has pierced ears. Not a small detail, actual piercing holes, clearly intentional, designed to hold heavy earrings. And here's the problem. In virtually every surviving work of ancient Egyptian art, only children and women were depicted with pierced ears. Adult male pharaohs were not. Not once. Not anywhere. Howard Carter, who discovered the tomb, noticed the holes back in 1922 and simply recorded them in his notes. He had no explanation and moved on. For decades, Egyptologists did the same. Then there was the gold itself. Microscopic analysis revealed something extraordinary. The gold composition of the face, the part that looks like Tutankhamun, was slightly different from the gold in the rest of the mask. The face registered at 23.2 carats. The headdress and collar registered at 23.5 carats. 2 different alloys, 2 different batches of gold. Then there was the timeline. When Tutankhamun died, he was around 18 or 19 years old, and his death appears to have been sudden, most likely from an infected leg fracture. Under ancient Egyptian religious law, a pharaoh had to be buried within exactly 70 days of death. That 70-day window had to accommodate mummification, the carving of a royal tomb, the construction of 3 nested sarcophagi, the gathering of thousands of individual funerary items, and the creation of a 10-kilogram solid gold mask inlaid with precious stones and microscopic hieroglyphic engravings. Look at the tomb itself, and the timeline begins to collapse. The burial chamber is remarkably small for a pharaoh. Archaeologists believe it was originally intended for a noble or lesser member of the court. The wall paintings were incomplete, clearly rushed. The massive stone sarcophagus showed signs of damage, likely caused by forcing it into a space that was barely large enough to contain it. Numerous items inside the tomb, statues, jewelry, coffin inscriptions, showed signs of having belonged to someone else entirely. Names had been scratched out and recarved. Faces had been altered. Something had gone badly wrong in those 70 days, and the mask was at the center of it. To understand what may have happened, you need to know about Nefertiti. Nefertiti is one of the most recognizable faces from the ancient world. Her famous painted limestone bust, discovered in 1912, has made her an icon of Egyptian beauty for over a century. Her name means the beautiful one has come. She was the principal wife of the so-called heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled Egypt during one of its most turbulent periods, dismantling the traditional religion and elevating a single sun god above all others. When Akhenaten died, something strange happened. Many scholars believe that Nefertiti may have continued to rule Egypt in her own right, adopting a new pharaonic name, Neferuaten. She would have been one of the very few women to ever sit on the throne of Egypt, following in the footsteps of the legendary Hatshepsut, and then she simply disappeared. No tomb, no confirmed mummy, no death records. Official state records from the period go suspiciously, almost surgically, quiet on the subject of Nefertiti. It is the kind of silence that, in ancient Egypt, usually meant deliberate erasure, a calculated effort to remove someone from history. British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves was the first to formally argue, in 2015, that Tutankhamun's golden mask had originally been made for Nefertiti. The pierced ears, the feminine facial proportions, the mismatched gold alloys, the cartouche, the oval hieroglyphic name plate that showed subtle signs of re-engraving. He argued that in the desperate scramble to bury the young pharaoh within the 70-day religious deadline, priests had taken Nefertiti's prepared funerary mask, replaced the face with a likeness of Tutankhamun, sealed the ear holes with gold plugs, and inscribed the boy king's name over hers. It was a stunning theory, and it was impossible to prove. Opening or invasively examining the mask was unthinkable. It was too sacred, too fragile, and too politically charged. X-ray fluorescence scans conducted in 2014, following the now infamous incident in which a museum worker accidentally broke off the mask's braided golden beard, appeared to confirm that the gold composition was consistent throughout and that the hieroglyphs showed no signs of alteration. The Nefertiti theory was publicly dismissed, case closed. But science had not yet said its final word. Let's go back to that 2014 incident because it matters more than people realized at the time. During routine cleaning at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, a worker accidentally snapped off the mask's braided ceremonial beard, a sacred symbol of divine royalty. In a panic, and apparently to avoid public embarrassment, museum staff reattached it using common industrial epoxy. The resulting visible damage to the chin of the world's most famous artifact caused international outrage and became a cautionary tale about cultural stewardship. Egypt's government moved quickly. An international conservation team, led by German conservator Christian Ekman, was assembled to properly remove the epoxy and restore the beard using beeswax, the same adhesive ancient craftsmen would have used. Before beginning the restoration, Ekman's team performed advanced X-ray fluorescence scanning to analyze the mask's elemental composition without touching it. The scans, as noted, appeared to show a uniform gold composition and undisturbed hieroglyphs. Ekman himself concluded that the mask had been made in two parts, face and headdress, but that this was standard practice for funerary masks of this period. He found no evidence of the face having been replaced. End of story. Or, so it seemed. Here is what X-ray fluorescence cannot do. Read the memory of atoms. X-rays reveal density and surface composition. They can tell you what an object is made of. but they cannot tell you how the metal was heated, hammered, stressed, or reworked at the atomic level. The invisible fingerprints left by thermal and mechanical processing, the ghost history of a metal object, are simply invisible to conventional scanning technology. By 2024, that had changed. Quantum resonance imaging, a technology born from advances in quantum sensing and atomic-level spectroscopy, can detect microscopic atomic displacements left by ancient heating, hammering, and reworking. It does not see what an object looks like. It reads what an object remembers. Dr. Helene Boss, a materials physicist at the Max Planck Institute in Munich, is one of the world's leading specialists in this technique. With permission from Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities, her team was granted access to Tutankhamun's mask at the Grand Egyptian Museum, after hours, using a completely non-invasive process for what was described publicly as a calibration test. The initial data mostly confirmed what earlier scans had shown, and then the machine found something under the cartouche. The hieroglyphic nameplate that bears Tutankhamun's name showed atomic displacements consistent with repeated hammering and remodeling beneath the visible surface. Stress patterns in the gold, patterns created by the ancient craftsman's tools thousands of years ago, told a story that no previous technology had been able to read. There was writing underneath. Older writing. Erased writing. When the team asked whether the system could digitally reconstruct the original inscription based on the microscopic stress signatures left by ancient tools, Dr. Boss confirmed that it could. Over 11 minutes, the erased hieroglyphs gradually resolved on the screen. The original name spelled out was Neferuaten, the royal name adopted by Nefertiti during her reign as pharaoh. But that was not all. Further scans of the ears revealed cylindrical plugs of gold alloy, hammered and polished with extraordinary precision to hide the original piercing holes, invisible to X-rays, but unmistakable to quantum resonance imaging. And along the boundary where the face meets the headdress, the gold carried what the team described as a thermal ghost, evidence that the face had been separately overheated and fused onto the existing structure, carefully positioned to avoid destroying the delicate glass inlays around the eyes. This alteration had been invisible for over 3,000 years, and it had been performed with a level of craftsmanship that, even by modern standards, borders on miraculous. With the quantum scan data in hand, the sequence of events in those frantic 70 days after Tutankhamun's death becomes possible to reconstruct. The young pharaoh died without warning. His successor, the official A, moved quickly to secure the throne. Tutankhamun had no prepared funerary mask. There had simply been no time to commission one, given how recently he had come to power. But Nefertiti, the vanished queen pharaoh, did have one. A completed funerary mask made for a female ruler. Pierced ears, feminine proportions, and her royal name inscribed in gold. The priests, bound by the inviolable 70-day religious law, made a decision. They took Nefertiti's mask. They removed her face and crafted a new one bearing the likeness of Tutankhamun. They filled the ear holes with perfectly matched gold plugs, smoothed and polished until no seam was visible to the naked eye. They erased her name from the cartouche and inscribed Tutankhamun's in its place. And then they buried it with the boy king, where it would remain untouched for 3,300 years. The most famous face in the ancient world was never his to begin with. The mask still sits in the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo. It still draws millions of visitors every year. It is still, undeniably, one of the greatest artistic achievements in human history. A masterpiece of goldsmithing that has endured 3 millennia while empires rose and fell around it. But now we know it carries a hidden name. A woman's name. The name of a queen who ruled one of the most powerful civilizations the world has ever seen, and who was then erased so completely from the record that even her burial mask was taken from her. And that raises questions we still cannot answer. If this was Nefertiti's mask, where is the rest of her burial? Where is her tomb? What other objects in Tutankhamun's legendary tomb were repurposed, renamed, and hidden in plain sight? The atoms remember everything. We're only just learning to listen.